Junior high, senior high. It's your opportunity to leave. Rachel, thank you very much. He is certainly holy. Bud, did you tell me you're taking communion to Mary this week?
Yes.
Okay, wanted to make sure we had it covered. I need someone to be thinking about that for next week, to take communion to Mary Prescott. So keep that in mind. Today we're going to talk about our third responsibility, the cross, taking up my cross. Lessons from the cross. There were 4 lessons. This is the third one. Luke chapter 9, verse 23, it says, take up, then it said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple but deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. The first one's responsibility. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. The next one was to deny ourselves, and today it's to do that daily. Do you ever think about what you do daily? I sat back this week and reviewing this sermon. I write my sermons ahead, and I sat back and I was reviewing the sermon. I thought, what are the things that I do daily? Well, I eat and I take medicine. I imagine if we had a show of hands, I'm not the only one that eats and takes medicine every day. And truthfully, I take enough pills that I don't even have to eat 3 meals. I can get by with one of them without just on the pill itself. So what else do I do daily? Well, that's a good question. I try to convince Deb how lucky she is to have me. And I want you to know I appreciate all of you reminding her of that every once in a while, because I know several of you do, and that's very nice. And she agrees with you. She couldn't wait to get home. I don't know if it was her sister or me. We're going with it was you wanting to get home to me. So that's what we're going with. Well, there's a lot of things that we do daily. It's just hard to name all of them, and we can think about that for a long time. But one thing that we need to do daily is to live for Jesus every day. Every day we need to have Him as part of our life. I've been blessed having the job that I do. I love being a minister. It's been a true blessing. I've told you many times that I don't really get up and go to work. I get up and go to church. So I have been blessed to have the job that I do. I still come in early. Now, I'm not quite as early as I was 3 or 4 years ago. Used to, I'd come in between 5 and 5:30. Now I try to be here no later than 6:30. And I don't know any preacher in the right mind doing that. So, in fact, that means I'm the only one I know that goes in that early. I'm the only one I know not in my right mind. So, I still do that. My approach to my work, many of you have heard me say this, every day's a new adventure. You know, whenever you're in the church, every day's a new adventure. Because every day God gives me an opportunity to touch someone for Him. And I am blessed by that. I get the opportunity every day to speak to someone about the Lord. So what a job. You know, that's a wonderful job to have, and I love it. Now, once in a while, my daily appointment from God, or my daily assignment, isn't quite so easy. Sometimes it's not always a pleasure, but I'm still glad that I'm doing what I'm doing. Sometimes you run into those mean-spirited people. I can think of a couple mean-spirited people I know. Bullies. I can think of those that are unkind, but it's still a job that you go do because you are representing God. It still needs to be done. As a Christian, we have to realize there should not be a day off. I can't get up this morning and say, you know, this is going to be my day off. They can get someone else to preach that sermon. No, there's a day. There may get a day off from my work, but I don't get a day off from the Lord. And we have to do that. I must face that every day I have to carry my cross. And to carry that cross means there's a responsibility. It also means that I'm going to deny myself. And it means that I need to do this every day. So let's go like we have throughout the rest of the week, the rest of the series. The very first thing I want you to think about is Jesus, and He's our example of this. Now, there's certainly no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure there's not in yours, that Jesus was about kingdom work every day. Now, my opinion, everyone note that on your bulletin there, Mike's opinion is that even whenever there was 30 years that are unaccountable for, we know that at age 12 he was in the temple teaching the teachers, remember that? We know that, but that's the only thing that we really have between birth and the time that he comes on the scene at about 30 years of age. There is no doubt in my mind that 30-year window, God the Father was still His first priority in whatever He was doing. It just wasn't all recorded for us. Why? Because we didn't have any need to know. and it would have been something much more elaborate than what we needed to know. He has given us enough to know about God the Father to help us with this. Teaching, healing, feeding, ministering to the multitudes of people, challenging them to walk closer to God. I'm sure that Jesus, as our example, there were those good days and there were those bad days. There were those days that he was dealing with obnoxious people that weren't wanting to listen, and there were those days that the people couldn't get enough of it. Does that sound a lot like our life? Well, it is, and that's the way it was with Jesus. Matthew 26, verse 55, I think that's one on the screen. In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, am I leading a rebellion? Now, he's at the temple, and the leaders have come wanting to put him in arrest. That you have come with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. In other words, they waited till a select time. He said, every day I've been about my Father's work. And as he's about that Father's work, and as he's preaching and teaching, it would be no different than it would today, folks. As he was teaching, there would be those that would be roaming in and out, listening. There'd be those that are sitting there hanging on every word. But there'd be others that are just kind of mingling and getting part of it, not all of it. So Jesus would have known what that was like as the crowds would have been coming around. Now the feeding of the 5,000, plus women and children to add them. You can imagine that he's teaching, and it didn't have a microphone. It wasn't an elaborate sound system, but it was the voice of God, so I'm pretty sure it carried well. And as all of them are listening to him, there would still been those that are playing on their cell phones or whatever they did at that day. There'd still been those that were distracted. But there were those that were hanging on every word he had to say. Because he was about the kingdom work daily. Daily. He was about the Father's work daily. So there was that message, that opportunity to tell them about faith and hope and the love of God. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 45 and 46, it says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go. Now this is after the feeding of the 5,000, and this is when Jesus is going to walk on the water. He sent the disciples on out and ahead of him, and while he dismissed the crowd. And then, after leaving them, now the disciples are out on the Sea of Galilee, and the crowds have been dismissed. They assume Jesus has gone to the sea with them. Where does he go? He went on a mountainside to pray. This is God in the flesh. So what's he doing? He is preparing through prayer. Now I've added a couple more that I want you to see. You can just write these in. In Mark chapter 1 and verse 35, Mark 1:35, very early in the morning while it was still dark. Now, this is about a preacher going in early. Jesus got up, left the house, and went to a solitary place where he prayed. So before the day ever got started, before the disciples were up and around, and before the host, the place where he was staying, was up and around, Jesus has got up, gone out to a secluded place, and prayed, talking once again to the Father. Daily doing this. Over in Luke, we're going to have one more account of him doing this daily, and I just wanted to put it in there for you. In Luke chapter 5 and verse 16, 5:16. But Jesus often withdrew to a lonely place and prayed. Now we're talking about God's Son here, folks. If we want to look at an example about how we are going to live daily for God, no better example than the very Son of God who come into this world to save us. And that very Son of God, who is God in the flesh, feels a need not only for an example to us, but a need for the strength that he gets from talking to the Father. You can be assured that there wasn't a day passed that Jesus didn't speak to the Father, that he didn't get on his knees and talk to the Father, or get into a humble position and talk to the Father. Not a day passed. He did this daily in his walk with God. So the very first challenge that you should get is, how's your prayer life? How's your prayer life? Are you praying daily? Now, I'm not talking about whenever you get that sandwich before you and you said, thank you, God, for this food. Now, that's a nice prayer, and I'm glad all of you are doing that. Who knows how that was prepared? So I'm glad all of you are doing that. That's a very nice thing to do. I'm talking about a relationship prayer where you really get down and you talk to God, where you're able to sit back and say, Father, I've come into your throne room, and before I can enter, I've got to apologize for the sins. I'm so sorry. Father, forgive me so that I can come before your presence. Oh, I'm so thankful for the beautiful stars that I've seen in the sky as I worship and praise your name. Oh, God, what a wonderful day as the gentle rain has fallen upon our crops. God, I need to speak to you about this that's going on in my life. Now I'm on a one-to-one, face-to-face basis. That's what Jesus was doing. That's the example that he is setting for us. So, our cross, today it's a daily cross. We've had responsibility, we've had to deny ourselves. Your daily cross, the very first thing I want you to see is this: living for Jesus. Being a Christian, a follower of Jesus, is an everyday responsibility. It's an everyday responsibility. That was my first cross, that I now have to make it daily. Responsibility. I'm going to pick up my cross, whatever it is, and I'm going to do it daily. Now, the second thing was deny myself. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to deny myself once a week so that I can be here from 10 to 12 and listen to Mike preach a nice, soft sermon for us, and we can have a good song service and be excited when we leave. No, it's talking about that I'm going to have to deny myself probably every day that I stand before God with something. And you say, well, that's heavy, that I've got to deny myself every day. Folks, every one of us should deny ourselves something every day, because every day sin's knocking on your door. And if sin knocks on your door, you need to say, I'm not answering that today. I'm going to deny myself of that knock on my door today from sin. Daily means that I'm going to face those responsibilities. I'm going to deny myself, and I'm going to do it every day. Because it's important to me that I get my life in order to do what the God wants me to. Now, this one's not on your outline either. I've added it later. 2 Timothy 4:2, you can write that one in. It said, be prepared in season and out of season. I've got to be doing this whenever it's really popular. Sometimes it's really popular. It's good to be religious around church people. And sometimes when I'm not around church people, it's not good to act that way. There's a double standard there. He said, I want you to do this every day, in season and out of season, no matter who's around. This is what I'm wanting you to do. Over in Romans, if you'd like to go over into Romans, we're going to use a little bit out of there in chapter 6, basically. It's where we're going to start. That'll be the gist of it. Here Paul has been writing to the Romans, and Romans is a very deep book if you've been reading that, if you've read it. But we're just going, let's look at the first part. What shall we say then? Shall we continue to sin that grace may abound, or the grace may increase? By no means. We died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? Shall we go on sinning just because we have that right? He said, no, I want you to start changing your life daily. Daily, I want you to be making these improvements. There should not be a holiday or a vacation day from walking with Jesus. So I can't allow that sin. I've got to not answer that door knock that is there. Over in verse 4, the same chapter there, it will say this. We were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. Live a new life. That old way was buried. I no longer want that to be a part of me. So that means that part of me that was separating me from God is buried and done away with. That means that I need to have a new daily procedure. I don't want to call it a practice or a habit, a new daily process of how I'm going to live. Now that life, that living for Jesus, means that, first of all, let's go back to whenever Jesus was here. He had good days, bad days. He had days that were really wonderful in teaching, days that people weren't paying attention. But every day he was with the Father. His life started with the Father. So the very first thing I want to drive home to you today is you've got this cross to do daily. If you want to succeed, your cross is going to be a responsibility that God has put upon you. That was the first sermon. That responsibility is going to call upon you to deny yourself of some things in your life. And now he's saying, I want you to do this every day. Now, if you're going to do it every day and you want to succeed, what happened with Jesus? He got up while it was still dark. He went out and had a prayer. Start your day with the Father. Start your day with the Father, folks. Don't be putting it off thinking, I'm going to have a little break at noon. I'm going to sit down and have some prayer. Well, what have you done for the first 6 hours? Now, I don't know about you, but those first 6 hours, that can be pretty trying to me. So whether you have worked into your calendar or not, you need to work in that every day I am going to start with prayer. It doesn't have to be long or elaborate. I told a family the other day at a funeral, I said, people think preachers have long, elaborate, fancy prayers. There's many days that my prayer is, need a little help here. Need a little help. And I've asked you before, all of us pray that way. Need a little help. It's a weak moment. How about a little strength? I can't do this on my own. So every morning, that's where I start. And every morning is where I want you to start. And every morning, that's where Jesus started. So if I want to carry my cross, my responsibility, if I want to be able to deny myself of those things that really look so good, man, that Harley looks good. Not long ago, I went out to the Harley shop. Now, I'm pretty stiff, and I looked at that salesman, and I said, can I sit on that? He said, I don't know. Can you get your leg over it? Smart aleck, give me another salesman. So, I think I can. Well, I got my leg over it. The problem was getting off of it. That was twofold. One, I didn't want to get off of it. And two, I had to get that salesman and said, could you get a hold of that foot? I don't want to scratch this thing. Yeah. It's not always easy. But sometimes, folks, there's just those things. Now, that's an elaborate one. But sometimes we just have to say, no, I can't do that. But you can't do that without the help of the Father. The next thing that we're going to do in our daily cross is to love Jesus. Matthew chapter 22 and verse 37, it's just one of my favorites, and you've heard it many times. Well, let's just read it. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. With all of me. I've got to love God. Now let me stop there before you panic. There's other things in life that you're going to enjoy and that you're going to love. Okay? I love those old bikes. I love those old cars. They're important to me. They're a hobby. They're just something that I get a lot of enjoyment out of. But that's not what he's talking about. These are competitions. He said, I want you to love me more than you love anything else. More than you love anything else. He wants me to love him more than I love Deb. More than anything else. He wants Deb to love him more than she loves me. That's the only one I want to be second to, by the way. So, yeah. That's who God is. He said, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Our love for Jesus, for God, it shouldn't have a switch, folks, on and off. It should always be on. I can't switch it off just because I've stumbled to sin, because that's when it kicks in the most and puts me under conviction. I want to take you over to a passage in John that I found a whole new insight for my life. I hope it will yours. I'm not going to ask you to agree with the interpretation. I just want to challenge you with it. In John chapter 21, verses 15 through 19. If you remember, this is after Peter's denied, Jesus has been resurrected, and he had told them that he would join them later, go ahead of them into Galilee. Now, if we go to verse 14, let's go to verse 14. Jesus had asked Peter 3 times, all right, everyone with me, you know where I'm at? Do you love me? Do you love me more than these? So on and so forth. Verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Now, everyone has always assumed that he's talking about the rest of the disciples. But how could we, and that's how I was taught. I want everyone to understand that. But let's look at a new thought. What had happened to Peter? Peter had gone back to Galilee. Do you remember what had just happened whenever all of this had taken place? They'd been out fishing. They hadn't had much success fishing. But they were back out on their fishing boat. Jesus said, cast your net over on the other side. Remember that? And the catch of fish was so great. Whenever Peter had denied Jesus, where did he head? Back to his comfort zone. He was a very good fisherman. He had a contract with the palace. He was a very good fisherman. And he went back to where he was most comfortable. I can't help but wonder, that net of fish had been pulled in. There was 153 fish, I think it was. A fish had been pulled in. Peter had literally jumped out of the boat and swam ashore. Jesus already had a fire going, cooking a little breakfast for them. Fish for breakfast, not my cup of tea, but that's what they were having. So anyway, all of that has taken place, and Jesus said, do you love me more than this? His comfort zone. Do you love me more than your job, where you were most comfortable? Do you love me more than fishing? I don't know how many men through the years have said, I can be with the Lord sitting alongside the bank. I said, well, you can, but you can be with him on Sunday morning sitting in church too. Yeah. Sometimes we have to see. Now that's just a thought that has come to my mind. I read that somewhere and I thought, man, what a good thought. See, the point is Peter denied and he turned around and went back to where he was most comfortable. And folks, whenever you deny, whenever you stumble, whenever you fall, when you've not been with the Father every day, you know where you're going to head? To your comfort zone, where you're the most comfortable. And if that's in sin, if you have not put that out of your life and it's a sinful spot, that's where you're going to turn around and head back to. I kind of believe that's what happened with Peter. That's my opinion. Everyone take note of that. That's on the video. That's my opinion. I think he got back to a comfort zone. I don't think God was asking him to compare with the other disciples. See, I can't compare how much I love God with how much you love God, but I can compare it with my comfort zone. So I want to challenge you to think about that. And finally, Peter said, you know I love you. Peter was hurt, and he said, you know that I love you, Lord. You know that I love you. See, our responsibility is our first cross. Our second cross is to deny ourselves and meet that responsibility. And today's cross is to do that every day. My daily cross is sharing Christ. And you say, well, that's not a burden, because a cross is a burden. That's my daily responsibility. And it's yours as well. It's not just mine because I'm the preacher. It's my daily responsibility. That means that every day I want to be able to share with another believer or with a non-believer. I'm just as comfortable sharing with believers, of letting me tell you how good God is to me. Deb and I, we had a blessing. I won't tell you the whole details, but it was a real blessing. We were able to help someone, and I was just amazed. I got to tell you, I was just amazed. And the amount that I helped with this person, the next day it come back to me. Not from that person, but from somewhere else. God is so good. God is so good. And we just sat there amazed as we talked about it, of how God had done that. See, God is wonderful. And we have to know that every day. In Romans chapter 10, in verse 14 and 15, here's what it's going to say. How then can they call on the one that they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they are sent? As is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. That's not just about preachers. That's about you. Folks, there's people that will never hear without you, and you may miss your daily opportunity. There are people that will never know about God unless you tell them, and that may be your daily opportunity. In verse 17 there, it will say this. Consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word of Christ. The message is heard. That's your daily responsibility. You may have to deny yourself a little bit of your comfort zone to be able to do that. But that is a daily responsibility. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, it says, always be prepared. Always be prepared. Every day. I can't just be prepared on Sundays and say, I know Mike's going to be preaching on the cross, and here's where I'm going to be. Next week's sermon is personal. My cross is personal. But this week it's daily. Are you ready to share today God? Something He's done for you. And I'm going to close with this. Let's think about a few things. You ever have God, all of a sudden there's just money that you didn't expect? And you think, how did that come about? How did that happen? You know, sometimes it happens. Have you ever found that you were just at your wit's end and all of a sudden there was another Christian had their shoulder, their arm around you? Do you ever find that you just were so depressed you just didn't know how you was going to get out of this hole, and it was another Christian that offered the hand to lift you up? You ever had a time when you just felt like, I'm sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore? And you look around and there's another Christian who is reaching for you. You ever had those moments? We're to do that daily. We have an awesome God. And all He's asking of you, He's not asking any miracles. He's not asking you to go out and raise the dead. He's not asking for a great miracle where you give millions of dollars to something. He said, I want you to realize that you have a responsibility in walking with me. I want you to be willing to deny yourself if you have to. And I want you to be able to do this every day. Every day. Will you please stand as we have our invitation?